Okay, welcome to today's talk. My top 10 numismatic predictions for 2026. And our speaker today, David Harper, retired editor from Numismatic News. Dave was with Numi News from 1978 to 2019. He was editor from 1994 to 2019. And without further ado, Dave Harper.
Thank you, Tony. It's a great pleasure to be here at Fun. Thank you for coming. I sure appreciate it. Since we last got together, I have turned 70 years old. And there are some days where I feel every inch a 70-year-old. And then there are other days like today where I'm like a kid in a candy shop or waiting, knowing Santa Claus is going to be delivering some great presents, because the market action that we've been experiencing in the last few months has been just incredible. And it's always a great pleasure to talk about things like that when it's moving than when it's static. I'm sure if you've been here over the years, you've known that I have predicted silver to be a certain price and it fell 30 cents short. And here now we're moving $7, $10 a day. So it's just an amazing change. In my time as a collector and as editor, I have basically seen 5 cycles through the silver market and 4 through the gold market. And so what I wanted to do is use those as a basis for the rest of my presentation. The first cycle that I witnessed as a kid when I was delivering newspapers was in 1967. Up until that date in 1967, the U.S. Treasury controlled the price of silver. They had a hoard of about 2 billion ounces, and they just fixed the price. And by 1967, the market wanted the price to be higher than the price they'd fixed it at, and so they freed it. They had been holding it at $1.29.29 an ounce because that's the price that silver in a silver dollar equals the face value. And any higher price would suddenly cause the price of the silver dollar, the silver in it, to go higher than face value. At $1.37, the price of silver would be higher than face value for our nickel, for our dimes, our quarters, our half dollars. And so when that cycle started, the market got wild. The price by the next year had more than doubled to $2.56 an ounce. One of the effects of that was the Treasury was in the process of retiring silver certificates, and the deadline for the ability to convert a silver certificate, a piece of paper, into actual silver was June the 24th, 1968. And the whole hobby went absolutely crazy. Buy ads in the papers, the magazines, what have you, will pay so much for a silver certificate. And as silver went up, the price for silver certificates went up, and it was just a feeding frenzy. When the redemption deadline passed, the market kind of calmed down. But I, as a paper boy, thought I would just mesmerize. How can silver go just absolutely crazy? And so I had this ambition. I was taking silver coins out of my collection and keep setting them aside, but I wanted a silver bar. So by 1969, I had enough to buy a silver bar. So for 200 bucks, I bought 100 ounces of silver. And I was pleased as punch until I realized that markets can go down as well as up. And the 69 price was at $2 was less than the 68 price. The 1970 price was almost back to the $1.29.29 that the Treasury Department had decreed was the official price. But I kept it, into the 70s, into my college years, so I ultimately was able to sell it for a profit, because that became my second witness of a cycle. Notice in this first part of it, I did not mention gold. Gold's price was still controlled, so it really didn't participate in this particular market cycle. But after Nixon took us off the gold standard completely and ended redemption from Fort Knox in 1971, the price of gold started going up also. And by the end of 1974, which on the last day of that year, it became legal for Americans to own gold, the price peaked for gold at $197.50. The silver peak that year was $6.70, and I was a poor college student and I needed money, so I unloaded my silver bar, and that helped keep me going for a few more months at the time. And I remember the tuition that I was paying at the time was $270 a semester. So that shows you how old I am and how helpful Wisconsin was to students in the 1970s. The third cycle that I witnessed was in 1980. As you all know, Nelson Bunker Hunt was trying to corner the silver market, and gold was kind of following along. And gold peaked at $850 and $850 an ounce, and silver at $50 an ounce. Now, that cycle in many ways has characteristics that have never been equaled since. I want you to cast your mind back to what you were doing on September 18th, 1978. That was a big day. It's still in the record books, and I looked it up and confirmed it. That was the single biggest daily jump in the price of silver that has ever happened in percentage terms. And what happened at the day before, it closed at $13.40 an ounce, and the next, on the 18th, it closed at $18.30. And that $4.90 increase. I'm sorry, $5.90. I can't add here. Sorry. That basically $5 increase just was shocking. I had the privilege at the time to be working near Bob Wilhite, who was our price guide editor. He had one of those old-fashioned teletype machines that you may or may not remember, but it was basically 100-year-old technology that was used for dealers to communicate, and it was like a clattering typewriter going all day long on rolls of paper. As I recall, they were yellow rolls of paper, and prices would be quoted. Dealers would say, I've got 100 of these or 50 of those, and they want to sell. And so Wilhite was, hey, look at this, and I was oohing and awing, and the owner of our company, Chet Krause, kind of got drawn into the conversation, and he was so moved that he went into the vault and he pulled out San Francisco Assay Office silver bar that had been there. I believe it was like 107 ounces. It was an odd size, but he spent the rest of the afternoon walking desk to desk saying, see, this has been in the vault, and we were just marveling at the huge increase that day in the price of silver. The next cycle concluded in 2011, where gold peaked out at $1,900 an ounce and silver at $48 an ounce. And the fifth cycle is the current one, and we don't know where the peak was. At the end of 2025, gold was $4,318.50, and silver was $71.59. Although I've seen it also quoted as 62 cents, so I hope you won't hold me for that 3 cents. But having experienced these, it is informing basically the rest of my talk. 4 years ago, I said basically at the beginning of a speech, buy gold, thank you very much. And I said that I could have stopped there and that would have been it. And the reason I did that is because gold is the investment where you can sleep at night. It's less volatile than silver. It has been more valuable, for eons, for millennia. And I was just doing some double checking. In the last 18 years, gold had only 4 down years compared to silver's 8 down years out of 18. And the most recent down year, gold was down 4.3%. The time that was in 2021. In 2018, it was down 0.9%. In 2015, it was down 12.1%. In 2013, it was down 27.3%. But even that 27% doesn't even reach the magnitude that silver can fluctuate. In 2013, when gold was down 27%, silver was down almost 38%. And so you can see why you'll sleep better at night with gold. But being a kid from the 60s and the circulation fines era, I'm much more emotionally attached to silver than I am to gold. I asked my great aunt once, who was born in 1881, and she lived in southern Minnesota and also in South Dakota. It was a farm wife. And I said, gee, what was it like to have gold in circulation? And she kind of looked at me and said, well, I don't know. I only ever had one gold coin. And so I asked her, why was that? And she said, well, when I graduated high school in 1899, the class trip was to the Twin Cities by train. And her father gave her a $5 gold piece for expenses. And that was her one and only encounter of a gold coin during the gold standard era. So again, I'm emotionally attached to silver, and I think a lot of us are, simply because that's what we have the most experience with. If you've been reading online, you see all sorts of reasons why bullion is going up. You hear things about how much interest on the national debt is being paid, which is $1 trillion. National debt's $38 trillion. And your eyes kind of glaze over because the numbers are so large. And of course, that's part of the reason why they're quoted, is that they're there to intimidate you and to shut down your reasoning facilities, to just go, oh my Lord, it's just so big. But if you compare time-wise, the $1 trillion interest that we're paying currently is 14.3% of the federal budget. And I look back to the British experience. In 1840, this was 25 years after the conclusion of the Napoleonic Wars, which were ruinously expensive for all the participants. But the British budget in 1840 was paying 65% of the total amount that's spent that year on interest. And that went on for year after year, decade after decade. And they did pretty well by the end of the 19th century. So, don't get overly awed by casual throwing around of economic statistics, no matter how true they are, how accurate they are. Kind of cut to the chase and start reasoning as to what's the big reason why gold is doing what it's doing. What's the big reason silver is doing what it's doing? So that said, that was the preamble. Maybe it's because I've gotten as old as I am, I'm getting a little more reckless. I'm going to go out on a limb. And my father was an accountant, so I love to doodle with numbers on paper and computers and spreadsheets and what have you. But in 2025, gold was up 65%. Went from $2,625.15 an ounce to $4,318.50. Silver was up much more at 145%, from $28.90 an ounce to $71.62. I think there's a whole lot more to go. I think $300 silver is not unreasonable, and I think $9,000 gold is also not unreasonable. And I will explain my reasoning as I go further along. I look back at the 79.80 record and remembering Nelson Bunker Hunt and remembering the time, it had an entirely different feel than what we had in 1968 or in 1974 or even in 2011. And gold went up from basically in 18 months from $200 an ounce to $850. So that's basically 4.25 times value in that short period of time. Silver, on the other hand, in the same period of time, went up by a factor of 10 to $50. And that shows you the extreme volatility that can occur with silver as compared to gold. So if you just use these simple 4.25 times gold, you get $8,764. And from the starting point at a point in last year, which is, I basically was trying to use the same 18 months periods as occurred in the late 70s. And silver, if you go up by 10 times, you get to 289. And really, you have to always keep in mind, the market is always right, except when it isn't. And it's a market dynamic that begins to play out that basically becomes untethered from all the basic facts that you think you know or what's going on. It just becomes a bidding frenzy. If you've ever been to an auction and somebody really wants something and there's a challenger and they just go head to head and they overbid something fierce just because it becomes a battle of egos. Well, at some point in a normal market fluctuation, it almost gets to that point where people are losing attachments to what's real and what are true facts, and they're just bidding for the sake of bidding. They're trend following. You know, it went up yesterday, it's going to go up tomorrow. I'll get in ahead of it. In 2011, I've got to go back to 2011. Gold went up from $1,135 an ounce to $1,900 an ounce. Silver went up from $17 an ounce to $48 an ounce. So silver was up the 180% to gold 67%. So the percentages are very similar to where we are now. If you compare 180 to 145 or 67 to 65, you'll go, uh-oh, we're at the top. So what makes us different? Some of it is just gut instinct of the players. I remember the peaks in 2011. The silver peak actually happened during the Central States Numismatic Society convention in Chicago. And it happened right on Bourse trading. And it was something because I was watching the market go up and up and up and a little bit. And I was always an enthusiastic purchaser of some of the mint commemoratives because I was writing stories about, you know, when the Olympic coins were issued. It was the first gold coin since 1933. And the Washington commemorative of 1982 was the first commemorative silver coin since 1954. And I was just all in on enthusiasm for the modern mint commemoratives. Well, by 2011, I had approximately $8,000 worth of these commemorative coins and what have you that I'd purchased at issue price and immediately watched them go down, and yet I kept buying, like Charlie Brown going after the football when Lucy is holding it. And so I thought, oh my word, it's getting close to where I can sell this for bullion and I'll get my money back. So I was going down to the convention, and the Silvertown booth was right in the front door. You know, now where Heritage is, it used to be Silvertown. And so I went up there, and I believe it was Leon Hendrickson's actual last show at the time. So I was very happy to be able to deal with them and to visit. So they bought it. The silver dollars were about $37 at the time. Of course, I'd love to still have them because they're much higher now. But I sold half of what I had and kept the other half. And but I was convinced at the time, you know, 48 was the top. And you know, sometimes, as I say, gut instincts is what makes the difference, and that's why I sold. And then it started backing off. Now, while this was going on, gold was going up, but it didn't actually hit its final new high of that year until about $1,900 on the 2nd of September. So they kind of divorced, which was a bit of an unusual thing. So it's difficult. It's difficult to say a naked opinion versus something that you can wrap your arms around. So what I will do next is explain why I'm thinking the present market is more like the 1980 blow-off than the 2011 blow-off. In 2011, everybody remembers the stock market crash in 2008, fears for the future, and what have you. And all of that always plays a role, but it wasn't playing the central role. In the present market, you've heard and you've read the polls where Americans are losing confidence in governments and government agencies, and how low can it go, basically. Well, this isn't happening in isolation. What's also happening is central banks of other countries are losing confidence in other central banks. And so this skepticism that's rising among average people is also rising in the halls of central bankers. And if you look at the present Ukraine war, Russia was trying to prepare for this for years, because the American Treasury basically controls the ability to make international payments through the SWIFT system. And when they don't like you for doing something, committing a crime or what have you, we will make sure that you can't participate in the SWIFT system. And so that eliminates the ability that you have to pay for things in US dollars. So Russia was buying gold. China was buying gold. They feared that they didn't want the retribution. They didn't want to be thrown out of the dollar payment mechanism without having a backstop. And that becomes contagious. Year after year, central bank buying kept pushing gold up little by little. And then collectors, investors, they see what the trend is doing and they start getting on the bandwagon. And that's where the market psychology starts feeding on itself, and it's how we have found ourselves to be as close to $5,000 an ounce as we are. And so I am going on instinct. I feel there's more room for this market to run. It began being led by gold and not silver because of the central banks. Silver has its own supply and demand dynamic. If you look at all of the improvements in technology with EVs, they now have a battery that uses a lot of silver that can charge very quickly and has a much greater range than any other. And the use in electronics for silver is going through the roof. When I started my career, we used to talk about how much silver was used in photography. And of course, that's now by the boards. It's been supplanted by industrial uses. And that's a fundamental, solid reason why silver has been starting to go up. But it followed gold rather than was being led by gold. We know central banks are not short-term traders. The gold they buy today is going to be in their vaults in 100 years' time or 200 years' time, or in someone's vault. And so it's a pretty solid market. The 2011 market was led more by silver. If you're wondering, I had cataract surgery, so occasionally I have a hard time figuring out whether I can read with my glasses on or whether I need them off. So right now I'm going to have to take them off, so please excuse me. So when gold went from 35 an ounce in 1974, peak of 197.50, it was blowing off 40 years of being officially priced by the Treasury, and it was not a price that changed from 1934 until the London Gold Pool was established in 1968. And I told you silver was controlled also by Treasury. And well, I guess I'll get to my predictions. I've covered most of this, so. Last year, I forecast that gold would be up. I did not put a specific price on it at the time because I had been frustrated so often to be, $10 short or $15 short that I just thought it's going to go up. So this is the year it chose to blow up. I said silver was going to go up. and that also did the same thing. And anyone who's a veteran of these talks will know that my third forecast, I said Bitcoin was going to go up. You have to say, naturally, he's wrong, because he's been wrong about Bitcoin from almost the get-go. It went from $93,564 at the time, at the beginning of last year, to $87,680, or a decline of 6.3%. But in the fall, in October, it was $126,000. So you're talking about animal spirits and market trends. That was something while it was happening. My fourth prediction last year was that there would be an attempt to abolish the cent, but it wouldn't succeed. Well, that's a question. How do you rate that? We had the last circulating cents struck, and they were sold at a Bowers and a Stack's Bowers auction in December, and they brought incredible money. But yet at the same time, we're having I can't think of the term, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence is this year, and there's going to be a cent with 1776, 2026 on it. And so I judged this that I was not correct, because the cent is basically, I assume it will stay abolished. I forecast the stainless steel nickel, because nickel costs 14 cents a piece to 14 cents a piece to make and issue, but nothing's happened on that yet, so I judged that as wrong. I forecast that the US dollar would go down, which gets back to our economic background, and it did, so I'll count that as a yes. I suggested everybody specifically to buy gold commemoratives on the secondary market. I've always been attracted to the modern gold commemoratives since I bought the $10 gold piece from 1984. For many years, gold always did better in those sets. I talked my father, I was so excited about the 1983-84 Olympic set, I talked my father into buying the set, and as I recall, the 3-coin proof set was $352, and the 3-coin Ankh set was $339, for a grand total cost of $691. Well, the current basically melt value is over $4,600. So if you had that long a time frame, you did quite well. And if you were buying gold commemoratives last year before this explosive growth, you did quite well. So I will count that as a successful prediction. I also, every year, Heritage issues a press release saying how many dollars worth of their sales they have, and what percentage of that, or what part of that are coin sales. And what I was using as the basis is the year in 2024, they sold $1.867 billion worth of collectible items. And of that, 380.7 million were coins. And so I said the coin portion was going to go up. And I could not confirm that, but I think I'm right in spirit. But if you know, let me know, and I will fess up. But right now I'm counting that as a correct forecast. And I said the young would embrace coin collecting, and I think we're seeing more and more young people coming into the hobby. I think they're as attracted to numismatics as I was, because the bullion market is just going crazy, and they're watching the headlines, and there are online if you're online on the internet and you have a feed and you get a coin feed, there's an awful lot of amateur presentations about, I found this or that. Someone had a 2009 Lincoln cent, one of the 4 commemoratives of that year, and said, "What's this? I've never seen it." And it's just multiplying. So I take that as the young will continue to embrace the hobby. And I also forecast that I was going to buy a 1909 SVDB cent. I did not do that. As I say, I've been fighting bad eyesight since the surgery, and so my forecast from 2025 basically added up to being correct on gold and silver and kind of a push on everything else, but it adds up to about 6 yes and 4 no. So my forecast for this year, gold is going to go up, and I will put a specific dollar number on it this year. It could see 9,000 this year, just because crazy buying feeds crazy buying, and you just don't know where it will end. It could end tomorrow, it could end in July, it could end in October. We could have a double dip market like we had well, I guess the double dip was the economy in 1980, not gold, but and I will forecast that again, that Bitcoin will go up. So I will not go any further than that, but I would say probably, considering my record, owners of Bitcoin probably should look out or hedge or do something. On January the 5th, Paul Hollis was sworn in as our new mint director. He's a longtime coin collector. He was a state legislator in Louisiana. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and I will forecast that taking over that position, he'll be the most consequential mint director since Philip Deal back in the late 90s. Watch him. He's someone absolutely to watch. And then I have a tradition of doing crazy forecasts. I've from time to time said that the U.S. government should sell the Federal Reserve or issue stock and let individuals participate in its ownership like they used to do with the Bank of England. But of course, that has never come to pass, and I've been inside conversations going, how crazy are you? Why are you saying that? So my crazy forecast for this year will be that they will announce the closure of the Denver Mint as part of our government cost cutting. It's the oldest of our two major operating mints. Philadelphia is much newer, but the sheer volume of coin production is just collapsing. If they are serious about not striking cents anymore, there isn't going to be a whole lot left to do to be divided among two mints, let alone keeping one mint busy. So that's my crazy forecast for this year, is that they'll announce the closure of the Denver Mint as a cost-cutting eventuality. Okay, I don't know how many of you, I'm still crazy for modern commemoratives, so I follow them very closely. I don't know how many of you are aware that the Best of the Mint golden medal set is going to be introduced this year. And what they're doing is they're taking 5 designs and making gold coins out of them, as selected by collectors that were in some way participating in a poll that the Mint was conducting. I don't honestly know if the poll was a private one or if there was some public participation. I know I did not see a public participation. But they're going to have a golden medal set with a 1916 Mercury dime design in gold, a Standing Liberty quarter design in gold, a Walking Liberty half-dollar design in gold, an 1804 dollar design in gold, and a 1907 St. Gaudens high relief design in gold. And these will be specially privy marked. And so I was going to say, which one of these is going to be most popular in terms of mintage? And so what I'm going to forecast is which one that's going to be most popular is going to be the Mercury dime design. It is a beloved one, but it's also the smallest quantity of gold of what's being offered. And coin collectors are nothing if not price sensitive. So I will forecast that if you're one of the buyers of these sets, the most likely one to buy will be the Mercury dime version. Okay, the next item is, I was at the Mint booth yesterday, and I was looking at what was on sale, and I was noticing they had some of the Proof Morgan and Peace dollars from last year still offered, and they were offered at last year's price, which was $95. Last year it did not seem at all cheap, but with silver pushing $80, it's suddenly they're not they don't seem as expensive anymore. The rule of thumb for mints used to be, and probably still is in the world field, is nothing would be priced at less than double the price of the bullion in it. So, you know, a $95 Morgan dollar, which has more than $60 worth of silver in it, is much less than double value. So I say mint repricing on a regular basis is going to make a comeback, because if gold and silver are fluctuating as mightily and handily and as much as they are presently, they will have to do that, because they just can't, you know, basically offer these at a loss. My eighth forecast is the FIFA commemoratives, which are the World Soccer Organization. All the money that they sell goes to here it is, I wrote it down finally, the semi-quincentennial coins, which means the 250th anniversary. And they have a mintage of 750, excuse me, 750,000 on the dollar, 100,000 on the gold. And there's just no way they're going to reach those sales numbers with what the likely price is going to be. So I will forecast that these will have incredibly low mintages by the time they reach their final sales stage. Number 9, and I had to do this. Do you remember a stock called GameStop that went from $20 to $480 during COVID? Well, that's the kind of environment we're in at the moment, or we're standing on the precipice on. So we're going to see a swelling of newcomers into our field. And I don't know how many of the individuals, the record crowds that are coming in to this show are newcomers, but certainly anybody who's coming in has to be aware of the crazy thing that's being done with gold and silver. My 10th forecast is that the US dollar will continue to fall. Now that's important, but it's not the driving factor that's making the current markets do what they're doing. It's a good ex post facto justification, but over time, inflation is a weird thing. Argentina since 1970 has had 5 currencies, and yet they still will take the new bills when they're issued. So it's like, what do you have to do to shake people's faith in a government issued currency? And that being the case, the dollar is still doing quite well, but it's going to edge lower. It's not going to collapse. I was at an earlier presentation where they were talking about making your collection portable, so that if you were in a fire or in civil unrest, you can grab it and flee. And I don't think it's going to get that bad. I think we'll still be in the comfort of our own studies and armchairs and wherever you like to read. So even though the dollar will be down by the end of the year, it's not going to be significant enough to make you have to change your routine. And if you wonder why I'm dwelling on bullion this year, it's simply because this is one of the few times in my life that it matters as much as it does. President John F. Kennedy said a rising tide lifts all boats, and that was in reference to the state of the economy, that if some people were doing well, they wanted to be sure everybody was doing well. And that's kind of where we are in the numismatic field. The rising bullion market basically lifts all boats. You know, dealers are making profits, the collectors that are selling their bullion holdings are making profits, and they have to put them somewhere. And over time, where they put it is back into the numismatic market. So you'll have rarities prices eventually going up and up and up, funded by the large profits that are being made by everybody on the silver and the gold bullion. And so I will now open the floor to questions. Yes, sir.
Price prediction for 2026.
Yes, $300.
At the end, okay.
Well, at some point this year, it could have risen and crashed, If you remember in 1980, silver, when it peaked out at $50, that was the 21st of January, and before the end of March, it was down to $10.80. So it had lost almost 80% of its value in the course of a couple of months. And gold, by the same token, went from $850 to $480. So it kind of lost about half. But you don't know where that blow-off peak is going to come, and so you just have to follow your instincts. A rule of thumb: you've all heard of the 16-to-1 silver to gold ratio. When Alexander Hamilton created the US dollar, he basically took some Spanish milled dollars and assayed them, and they came as close as they could and said, that's the US dollar. Well, he was a little bit off in his weight, and so he set up the ratio at 15-to-1, and that just messed things up because it overvalued silver and undervalued gold, so gold just immediately left the country. And it wasn't until a devaluation in 1834 that reduced the gold weights by 7% that it actually got on an even keel at 16-to-1. But then, by golly, they went and discovered gold in California in 1848, so that threw the balance to silver. And the U.S. historically was always fighting. 16-to-1 was the historical number, but it never seemed to work in practice in the marketplace. And so we use it as a totem, but it doesn't basically work out. In recent years, you've seen it's been more than 100-to-1, and presently it's about 57, 56-to-1. And so what I would do is to know when you're getting to a blow-off top is in 1980, it got to 17-to-1. The $50 silver to $850 gold. So if you're coming anywhere near that neighborhood of 17-to-1, you better start planning your exit because you may not have much more time. And so it's a wild high number, but how long it'll last, it may be just 1 second on your electronic screen. Yes, sir.
You said you like gold commemoratives.
Yes.
The classic ones or modern?
Well, in my case, it was the modern ones. I admired the classic ones, but I never got into those. They were always beyond my budget. Are you a collector of the modern? I'm sorry, the older classic gold?
No, I like the old ones. Personally.
And certainly the 2.5 from 1926 would make it a wonderful thing to show around now that we're at the 250th anniversary of the country. And another question. Oh, please, one more. Yes, sir.
What are the good and bad from having left Numismatic News about 6 years ago? From your perspective, what has been good for you? What has been not so good for you in leaving that position?
Well, I retired, and so it's basically been 100% good. Although I occasionally dream that I'm still working, and then I wake up in a cold sweat. But nowadays I'm on many volunteer committees in the village of Iola. I'm on the village board, and I'm on the fire board, and the ambulance board, and the Lake District board. And so if you wonder what my hobby is, I like to attend meetings, I guess. But no, it's all been good. I've been retired now 7 years. And time just flies by. So I highly recommend it. Yes, sir.
Why was your column called Class of 1963?
I'm sorry, speak.
Why was your column called Class of 1963?
That was the year I began collecting coins. So ever since 1963, and that above itself is an interesting story. If you remember comic books of the time, they used to have crazy little ads in them, and one of them was a coin ad that I saw. We'll pay $50 for any Lincoln cent dated before 1940, I think was the year in the ad. And so naturally, I had to look at every single cent in the house, in my piggy bank, what my parents had, what my brother had. And by the time I got done with that, my mother said, let's take him to the hobby shop. And I got a Lincoln album, and so I started filling them, and I never quit. So I'm a child of the circulation finds era, and that's how I think. That's what I've always liked to do and talk about. So. Another question. Yes?
About the price of copper.
Price of copper, we're over $6 a pound now. With the other metals going crazy, they all tend to move in tandem. So while I haven't made a specific forecast about it, it certainly wouldn't surprise me to see it $10 a pound with everything else, doubling in the meantime. So, at $1.54, the copper in a cent is worth a cent. So we're at 4 times that, so the copper in a cent melt value is 4 cents. So if it goes up to 10, well, that makes it even more valuable. And I was talking to an individual who makes bags of cents for a local coin dealer, and she said they're just going out the door like crazy. But of course she salts it. She puts an Indian cent in one, and a semi-key date in another. And if you remember also, when they abolished the half cent in 1857 and introduced the small cent in 1856, you can make a good case that was the first general public coin boom, because everybody said, oh, I better save these, the older large cents. And there was one instance that someone had saved so many large cents that the building that he had them stored in collapsed because he couldn't take the weight. So I hope if you're one of those people that want to get into cents, that you've got strong floor and supports. Yes, sir.
You had alluded to the fact that the Denver Mint may close.
Yes.
I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the future of all the mints closing and we no longer produce coins.
That is the trend. That absolutely is the trend. The Scandinavian mints have been closing, and so I have been watching that closely. I was on record, if someone wants to look up in old numismatic news, of saying that coins will not be abolished in my lifetime, but I'm 70 now, so I don't know how many more years I can promise that we'll still have coins. But what I can say is, if the government is serious about cutting costs and minting volumes continue to plunge, they got to start figuring out where they're going to rationalize the production. And so I picked Denver. I'm not picking on Denver, but I just happened to pick it because it was the older of the 2 major mints. Yes, sir.
If silver keeps increasing like it is that going to discourage all these new and young collectors, or are they more get into it for the collector?
I think basically the collector impulse, once it's activated, will continue. So if they're chasing silver at 80 and then 90 and 100 and wherever it ends, once they get that bit in their teeth, it never goes away. I mean, as I say, when I was a paper boy wanting to buy a silver bar, I mean, that was a long time ago, and here I am standing here and facing the present day. Please, anyone else? Well, I'll take this opportunity to introduce Clifford Mishler. He's in the back of the room. He's the man who hired me in 1978, and I am forever grateful that he saw fit to do so. It was a heck of a ride, and we're still working. We're working on a Chet Krause Park in Iola. It is nearly done. The only thing that's left to do is erect monument stones where we engrave the names of donors and such. But we're also engraving the name of every single employee who worked for Krause from its founding in 1952 to the time it was sold in 2002. So there's like 1,946 names of my fellow employees that are going to go on a monument in that park, because Chet Krause always firmly believed in the value of people, and the employees put him where he was. He never claimed to be a self-made man. He had a lot of helpers, and he always was very gracious about acknowledging that. Another question. Well, it looks like it's time to go. Oh, yeah, yes, sir, yes.
Another crazy thought. If the government is now no longer minting cents, do you think they'd retract the prohibition on melting cents?
Government laws are almost eternal. So it's almost like they have to admit the mistake, or that it is a mistake. So I would assume the law will stay on the books. And I don't even know what the percentage of cents in circulation now are still copper. It would be interesting to see what was what, but I don't think they'll get rid of that law. And that also prohibits the melting of or an export of nickels. So remember that, you can't send them out of the country. They got to stay here. Yes, sir?
Do you think the public will ever accept a $1 coin and do away with the $1 bill?
You know, that's the great conundrum. My head always said that we should. My heart, my gut always said, yeah, we're not gonna. So if it happens, you know, I'll be pleasantly surprised, but right now I don't expect it. Oh, and I saw a fellow in the room sent me a online thing where they're talking about a $250 bill to put President Trump's portrait on it, and you know that breaks more traditions than I can enumerate. But you know, right now the official policy is they don't want anything higher than a $100 bill because they don't want to have illicit cash transactions facilitated. So if they're serious about a $250 bill, it's going to break that restriction, and we're off to the races yet again. Another question. Yes, sir.
I missed the start of your presentation. Did you discuss what started this increase in the price of silver and gold?
Well, if anyone could follow me, because I seem to get lost in my bad eyesight, what really started it was the central bank buying of gold, and incrementally, little by little, they're putting more and more away, and the price was going up a little bit, and it was establishing a trend. And so then other people notice when a trend is established, and then they jump on the trend. And so it's something that had a real solid basis, in fact, but it then starts feeding on itself as a market phenomenon. And I think that's where we are. If you live through the 79-80 market where things went crazy, we're in a similar psychological position to that. So, yes, ma'am.
So under that scenario, do you forecast Bitcoin is going to go to that path?
Is it going to what?
Is Bitcoin going to go that path, meaning that people will jump on the bandwagon?
That's certainly its history. Right now, it's basically where it was a year ago, but it has had prolonged down periods, and we just came off a $126,000 high in October. So it'll take a while, I'm sure, before people feel confident enough to start putting money into it again. Yes, sir.
You know, there's currently a bill in Congress for an audit of Fort Knox. So what would you say would be how would you think gold would react from the results of that audit?
I think it would make a lot of excited headlines. I know for years many people have said it's not really there, but Clifford was at the last formal audit in 1974, was it? And what he saw was the gold was there, but you know, a lot can happen in 52 years. So
You also got to remember, when we were there, they kind of let us look through a peephole in a vault door to see that there was gold back there. We didn't know how deep it was. I have no question in my mind that the gold is there. And it is unfortunately, from a value standpoint, is valued at the old historic government price.
I'm confident the gold is there also, but I think having a full and fair public audit would be wonderful. Because you know, it's about $1.2 trillion worth of gold between that and the Federal Reserve Bank in New York and then the Mint's holdings. So it probably would be a great idea to have the audit and be over and done with it. But I would think it would be positive, because anything, they used to say about publicity, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad as long as you're mentioned. The same thing with gold. If you're auditing it or not auditing it, as long as it's in the headline, it's good for gold.
But from a government expense standpoint, it will cost millions of dollars to conduct that ballot, and they want to do it every 5 years.
Any other questions? Yes?
So do you favor the gold commemoratives
Do,
or silver?
well, personally, I own many more silver than I do of gold. So I haven't bought any gold commemoratives since the 2006 San Francisco Mint issue, which, that's 20 years ago now. So that shows you how active I am on gold commemoratives. But if you're going to buy gold anyway, make it fun. Put a set together, because these are, almost all of them are basically trading at melt value, and maybe even less, because, numismatics, a dealer, it's a capital intensive business. If you buy something, you got to sell it. So you have to flip it to another dealer, you send it to a refiner. The refiners now are so backed up, they don't get their money. So the longer their money is tied up, the lower the price they can offer to buy it today. So it's always less now than spot. So if you're willing to pay more than what they want to flip their inventory at, you should be able to do well, and it could be for less than the spot price. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
When you mentioned refiners, is that true for both gold and silver?
Is what?
Refiners being backed up.
Well, it's primarily silver. I really don't have any details about gold. Gold is so much rarer, and the big gold refineries are in Switzerland. So silver, it's much more of our domestic industry. And so I can just say that, the silver refiners are backed up.
And the second question, do you think banks will offer incentive to get cents back in circulation?
I don't think so. When I do my shopping, I go to Aldi's as a grocery store, and they have a sign right up there saying they're not making cents anymore. Please pay if you're paying cash, please give us the exact change. And if every merchant in the country is doing that, the banks have no incentive at all to try to get the cent back into circulation. They'll just end up withdrawing them all over time.
I was at a store and they wouldn't give me back.
I was what?
I was at a store and they would not give me back, the penny. Oh, they're not making pennies anymore, so.
Well, you can charge it, or you could write a check.
Yeah.
So, but they will not give you the exact change, because they don't have cents anymore.
Banks aren't giving them out?
Pardon?
Banks aren't giving them out anymore?
Well, they're given out at my bank, but I don't know what they're doing with businesses. So, one more question, then I guess we're.
So with all the information now we hear about the manipulation, the big banks, the silver futures market, manipulating the price of silver with paper contracts, right? So for every ounce, there's like 100 paper contracts. Is there any law, or is there any move or anything in the works to prevent these big institutions from forcing the price of silver down, supposedly the market naturally move on its own, have price discovery?
There's no law that I'm aware of, but I have to cite something. There's a fellow named Daniel Drew, who was a mid-19th century financial pirate, and he for his practice came the term watered stock. He basically would have a cattle drive to the market just before he'd get there. He'd make sure his cattle were terribly thirsty. Then he would get them to water, and they would drink and drink and drink and drink, so their weight was way up. So then he'd go into the merchants and say, I'm going to sell my cattle, and they'd weigh them, and there was a huge percentage of water weight, and of course they got wise to him, and so that sharp practice ended, but it gave us a term in our lexicon of watered stock. But where I'm going with this is he also traded stocks and futures and what have you. He said, he who sells what isn't his'n must buy it back or go to prison. And that's basically how the futures market works. You can go and offer a contract tomorrow or today, if the market's open today, and sell something, and then have it expire in 6 months. As long as you buy it back between now and the expiration, it's all cash, it's all basically a financial fiction. There's nothing real changing hands. And that's basically how the market handles itself. So I'm not aware that's a kind of practice that would ever be banned.
Well, you hear now they want the
Well, you have to read the fine print in the contract, because I believe the contract languages now say that cash is good in lieu of delivery. And so a futures contract is just that. It's a contract. You read it, you abide by the terms. And if you actually want delivery, you know, right now the cash price is higher than a futures price. Well, any other questions? We have plenty of time. I'm patient. I don't have to read anything when you ask me questions, so please. All right, I think we're done. Thank you so much.